Hello, welcome back to the Cloudy Desk. I'm Claudia, and today we're going to be doing some paint palette maintenance. Oh, sorry, hitting the camera there. This is specifically going to be working on my gouache palettes, not watercolor. Yeah, and through that I also want to talk about what colors I'm using and what ones I've sort of taken out of these two palettes. These are my main ones. The one we'll be working with mostly today is my Art Toolkit Pocket Size Palette. I need to refill quite a few of these pans, so we're gonna do that together. But I also just want to show, this is an Altoid tin that I have repurposed into being a little travel palette. I just wanted to show this as well, and when it comes up, talk about which colors are in both of these, because they're not quite the same. Mostly the same, but not quite the same. But this is, I 3D printed this at work. My job does have a 3D printer that I have access to, and so I modified a file I found online so that I can fit 9 colors. It's probably similar to, but not quite, sort of standard pan size, and then a little water well, so if I want I can put some water here. And then I have this little travel palette with me, and I do have somewhere, not here, oh, right here. I was doing an assessment of everything and nothing's quite in its right spot. A little mixing tray insert thing that when I'm working can sort of fit here in the lid, so I have that. And then when I'm all set, it just fits right in here and I can close it up. Yeah, so this is sort of my secondary, but it holds some more colors. Well, not more colors, it holds more of the colors than what fits in here. So I got started using gouache this fall. I had seen, I think her YouTube handle is Katie's Craft Studio. I will include a link to her down below. We're in a Discord server together, and she was using gouache to do some illustrations in her journal at the time, sort of late last summer, and I just really loved it. And it seeing that I've been for the last year or two trying to get more into watercolors and painting more in general, and I really like watercolors, but there's like some part of it that doesn't quite work with either my style of painting or really how I learned how to paint. I was never like formally trained watercolors, and sometimes the layering is really hard for me, whereas I painted a lot more with acrylic and oil, and I'm used to sort of building that way as opposed to building with watercolors. And I thought that maybe gouache should actually work with how my brain works a little bit more. And so at the time I bought this starter set. This is a Schminke. I think it comes with 10 tubes, sort of standard, and I'll show you which ones came in it, which ones I've bought since then. Set, just so I could try it out. I wanted a set of more than just the primaries, because I know if I had to like learn how to use it and also mix every single color, I'd get frustrated and probably wouldn't do it. So I wanted something more like in a 10-12 tube set. And this was a great starter pack. Like, I really recommend if you're someone who wants to try gouache, like this was a great thing for me to try and then build off of. I think most of the colors I'm currently using do come from here with just a couple additional ones. Yeah, so let's take a look at what we got. So first I'm going to start with the colors that I've taken out of the palette, and I think there's 3 of those. These 3 down here. So first is let's go full beauty tuber, the Madder Lake Deep. I took this one out because it is not light fast, and while I'm not really intending to be hanging or displaying a lot of this work, I don't want to be restricted in that I can't. I do like being able to give people things, and I don't want to have to describe to them, like, make sure you hang this somewhere where there isn't a ton of light or whatever. So this was sort of my first priority of things I wanted to take out because it just didn't quite work for me. And I'll talk a little bit more, but I replaced it with this one, the purple magenta. Yeah, if you are someone who knows pigments, I do not. So this was PR 83 that I took out, and I replaced it with PR 122. I'm trying to start to get to know pigment numbers, but it is hard for me. The other one I took out was lemon yellow. This set came with 2 yellows, so both cadmium yellow and lemon yellow, and I just liked that this felt really transparent, and like if I was making a mix, I felt like I had to use a lot of it, or it just didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. It is also a cooler yellow, so it might just be that it wasn't not really sort of in my preferred palette, but I've taken that out and I just have this cadmium yellow hue. The last color I have taken out and again, let's talk pigments. So the lemon yellow I took out is PY3. The one I saved is PY154. We can see that. The final color I took out of the set is the ivory black, which is BK1 and BK9. I just don't use black a lot, and I know it can be useful in mixes, but I just didn't want to even have the temptation to use it for shadows. Like, I just didn't want to have it there. I'd rather try to mix my dark colors. So I took this out. I don't have a direct replacement for it yet. I have done an order where I bought a couple more tubes, and maybe once all of those things arrive, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I have purposely left some space in this palette for that reason. But yeah, so I took black out, and honestly, haven't missed it. Don't need black. So now let's talk about what is in here. And what makes this a little annoying is these are both in slightly different orders, so it's going to be a little tricky going through them all. But I will say, this just has one fewer color than this one has. Yes, that is correct. So there's only really one difference of something that didn't make it into here, and I will mention that one briefly once I get there. But yes, first and foremost, probably most importantly with gouache, titanium white, PW6. I use this more than anything else, as sort of exemplified by the fact that I have the equivalent of 3 standard Art Toolkit tins of it in this palette. This big double one is the white that I use for mixing colors, so this is sort of my dirty white, and this is the clean white that I use, so I always have one that's a little bit purer, slash if I'm too lazy to clean this off, I use this one, and then that one also turns into a dirty white. I'm not the best at separating the use of these two. This was something that was suggested to me by Katie, and I do think it's a really great idea, and I do mostly stick to it. But at the very least, having double white has been a lifesaver, because you can see I last filled this palette sort of all at once, made sure they were all even, and white is the thing that I've clearly used the most of, because I've like almost finished an entire double tin as well as most of the single tin. Yeah, so if you're getting started in gouache and you're making a palette, put a lot of white in it. If you have the option, buy a bigger tube of white than your other colors. I want to do that. When I was just buying more tubes, I just bought another 15 ml tube, but it would be useful to have one that's larger because I'm definitely going through this faster than the other colors. I guess we'll go in order of the tubes here. I already mentioned I have cadmium yellow hue here. This is sort of my go-to standard yellow. I have it in both palettes, so it's here, and I have it here. Definitely one of the colors, sort of top 5 color I use the most. It's been really good for mixing. And then next I have cadmium red hue, so I have both the red and the yellow cadmium colors. I have barely used it. It might just be a reflection of the things I'm painting right now, but both of my like reds I'm not really touching much. So that's the cadmium red hue, which is PR 242, and the purple magenta, which are these two here. You can sort of see, barely touch. You can't see the pan at the bottom at all. And that could also be a little bit of the fact that they might have a stronger tinting strength, so I don't have to use as much of them. But I definitely don't, it's not my go-to color family in general, the reds. It might change, like I said, if you watched my previous video about like my art goals for the year, I'm painting New York City over the course of the year, so maybe as the seasons change, red will be something I lean into more. Right now it's a lot of like cool grays and browns, just sort of like the winter colors, but I do have both of those red colors here in this palette. Next is ultramarine blue, and this is the blue I think I lean on the most. It is PB29. This came with the set, I do believe, and as you can see, I am leaning on it quite heavily. It mixes really well, and I really enjoy the shades I'm able to get with this blue. It's definitely sort of the one I go for more. I have it here, and this one it's really started like glowing in a really beautiful way. But yeah, so this is my main blue that I use, but I did at one point, because I did need an additional blue, get a helio blue, which is PB15. I think this one is a phthalo blue shade. I would have to double check that. I have it here. The one thing I've noticed, this one, because I use my gouache dried, obviously I'm not using a fresh palette, this definitely cracks more than some of the other colors. So this is one, if I'm not using my palette regularly, is one that's really prone to sort of more cracking. It looks like I don't use it as much. I do know for a fact this, you don't need to, a little goes a really long way, so you don't need to use a ton of this, and that could also be why it looks like I use more of the ultramarine blue. But because of how powerful it is, that is a big reason why I think I use the ultramarine more. We've got some alarms. I guess I should just wait a second. Not alarms, sirens. Let that pass. Yeah, so I like the ultramarine blue more because I think I feel more in control, whereas this can very quickly overpower a mix. But it's a useful one to have, particularly for some sky colors. I do also have it here. And then, so this is the helio green bluish shade. It's PG6. I do not love this color. It is not really a green, not really a blue. When I'm mixing greens, I rarely remember or even think to use this. So this one is going to be the next one that I remove from my palette. I have purchased a green that I think is more in line with the way I paint, that I will be replacing this one with. It looks like I've used it a lot, like you can start to see the tin underneath, but I think that's because I've never refilled it since I set up this pan in like August. because I just really don't use it that much. Yeah, I do have it in here. This one will be harder to remove. Luckily with these, I have so many extra tins that I could at least just take the tin out and put a fresh one in. But I will probably clean it. Since these are water soluble, I could just put it in water and sort of pick it out. This one I will have to scrape out more, but I think it will be worth it for me because I just do not use that color at all. And I might not put the green in here since I can mix greens. I might use this for a different use. Haven't quite gotten there yet. Once my tubes arrive, my bigger priority is going to be getting this set up with the new colors, and then as I see how I use them, I'll make a decision about what I want to fit in there. Yeah, so that helio green bluish is just not super useful to me. Now we're getting into some of the more like earth colors, I guess. The titanium gold ochre, I love this. This is an incredible color. It is PBR 24. It's great. I think using both of these are both, I would say, probably on the warmer side of yellows, whereas, sorry, just clanging a whole bunch here. This is definitely like a cooler yellow. But with these two yellows, I feel like I've been really content with the shades I've been able to make in terms of greens, but also neutrals and sort of even just like my yellow accenting type things, like for sunsets and stuff. Like this has been really great and really lovely to mix with and plays really nicely with a lot of the shades I have. And I have this in both palettes, and this is definitely one of, again, sort of top 5 shades. If we're doing top 5 shades, it's like the 2 yellows, white, blue, and then the one we'll get to next, which is my burnt sienna. It is my, after white, probably most used color right now. I paint a lot of buildings. There's a lot of brown in buildings. I use it with my blues to make my like shadowy colors and some grays, actually some like warmer neutrally grays. This is great. At some point I did debate if I wanted to switch this into a double palette too, since I'm leaning on it so much, but I did get a tube of Jane's gray, which I believe, again, under the guidance of Katie, is a mix of these two colors. So I think that will mean I lean on this one a little bit less, so I don't need to do an actual double pan of the burnt sienna. But if I wasn't getting that, I would be upgrading this to this double palette because I use it so much. Katie and I were also talking that we kind of lean on some of these browns as reds too, which is also kind of why I don't use these reds. But speaking of brownish reds, I've got my final color here, which is the English red, which is PR 101. It is a very reddish brown. I will get my swatch of this whole palette in just a second so you can see what these look like. That is the one color from this that I don't have in here. So maybe when I take this out, that will be one I put in. It might even be that I take out one of the reds at the same time and replace that with this English red, and then I have 2 colors I get to add, so I could have English red and one other. I still need to decide, but I've got time. There's no rush. This is just kind of a fun palette. It's not my main one by any sense. Oh, well, maybe this will be the one that goes. And if not, I've got some gum Arabic. I can kind of stick it down in there. So let me get my swatches so you can see what this looks like. Yeah, just 1 second. If you watched my art goals video, you'll know that I keep sort of my go-to painting drawing supplies in my Toyo steel box, and that includes, on the top I have magnetized or attached, the swatch itself is not magnetized, swatches of the palettes I carry around with me. So we're not looking at the watercolor, but this is the, you can see that. Swatches of the colors I'm using. So here we have my 2 whites, the purple magenta, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, English red, burnt sienna, the helio green bluish, the helio blue, and the ultramarine. I'll get it a little bit closer. Yeah, so what do you think? I will be, like I mentioned, replacing the green with a green that's a little bit closer to the things I use or the stuff that I'm painting. I will be getting that Jane's gray, which is these 2 mixed, and then I actually am also getting a buff titanium because I lean a lot on whites, but also I make a lot of neutral shades, and I think having that sort of like a pre-mix that I can use and lean on will also help with how quickly I'm going through some of the whites and how easily I'm able to make some of the colors I want. But yeah, I think this is a really flexible palette. Obviously, if you're painting things that look very different, or if your like color aesthetic is very different than mine, you'll need different colors. But this works for me in terms of sort of like a, not like totally muted, but not like a excessively vibrant lineup. Yeah, words. I know words. But now that we have that tour, I need to refill some of these. So we're going to be doing that together. I think refilling these Art Toolkit pans are pretty easy. I mean, not like to imply anything if you're someone who has issues with it. I just mean it's not I don't find it too intimidating once you've done it once or twice. Does this one need more? Maybe a little. Yeah, so what I did before we got here, my sponge is really my like go-to tool for everything with this palette. It's what I use to clean my brush when I'm painting, but also I sponge cleaned this whole mixing palette area. If I wanted to get really fussy with it, you can use those magic erasers on it, and that really takes everything off, but I don't care so much. If I was doing a real deep clean, I would take all of these off and sort of clean the magnet itself too, but this is just like a little bit of a touch-up. I then also sort of went through and sponged each of the tins themselves because I am bad about mixing pigments in the tins, so just to make sure I had sort of a mostly clean surface to start with. I know some folks like to use toothpicks for like mixing tins. I really like using, I have this like very thick safety pin from quilting. I like to use this because I can wipe it off and reuse it, whereas toothpicks, it's sort of like one and done, and it just, I feel like I go through a lot of toothpicks that way, and that just isn't super appealing to me. The one thing I will say, if you're used to doing watercolor pan refilling as opposed to gouache, watercolor you can kind of overfill your tubes because they kind of settle and evaporate down. These do not do that nearly as much. So I wouldn't, if anything, err on the side of underfilling, just so you don't cause issues for yourself in terms of like it sticking to the lid of the palette. I do like to, as much as I can, try to fill if the paint has sort of separated from the sides of the pan. I like to stick a little bit in there with the safety pin. Maybe it doesn't do anything, but I feel like it sort of helps reinforce the seal, whereas if it stays open, I kind of feel like water can get in there and sort of loosen it, and that's where you get more pieces falling out. So yeah, like if I were filling this with watercolor, I would go higher because it would sort of settle deep down, but this won't evaporate that same way, so we're just gonna leave that as is. And no, it's not maybe as full as it could get, but it is enough for me because I can always I have my paints right here. I'm not going on like a super long trip right now. I can always refill it. That is something I actually will be doing this like summer with my mom. So we're going on a hiking trip on the West Coast, and I will I will be wanting to bring art supplies with me. So at some point as we get a little bit closer, I'm going to be doing some research on like what sort of shades I should have like well represented based on like the colors of the scenery, because I want to be painting sort of what we see on the hikes, and setting up some sort of travel setup. It'll probably be one of these tins and sort of getting that ready to go. Although I do also have, which I can get in just 1 second, is an additional tin from on Etsy. I believe his his shop name is Art to Embers or something. This tin, which holds 12. So this doesn't hold water, but he also sells separately, and it's something I'm kind of interested in. It's sort of equivalent to the portable painters that kind of slide over, that magnetically attach when it slides over when it's closed, like it's a sort of, it cases it, and when you open up they magnetically attach to the side and you can use them to hold water. So I might use this. I've been trying to decide. I really like what he does with 3D printing, and so having this mixing palette sort of clip on and having this here, so I wanted to support him and try it out. I haven't filled it yet, but this might be, maybe this is where I build my Yosemite palette. Yeah, so we got the 2 white. So like I was saying, I think these are my like top shades. Maybe it'd be interesting to challenge myself to paint with only these 12. Sorry, I just dropped my sponge. Dropped my sponge, and like I said, it is my like do everything tool. So it's the one thing I sort of need really in this process. Any of these other things I could replace. I've got 10,000 towels and pins around me. This is also my sewing desk. I have also purchased in that same same order of the additional tubes, I've purchased more sponges so I can cut them up and put them in different sets. And sort of case in point, I dropped the pin, just letting it be on the floor. I'll pick it up after, and grabbed an additional one. Yep, so cadmium yellow. Yes, sorry, what I was saying. Since these are my most used colors, and it is almost a split primary palette, like I got my 2 blues, sort of 2 yellows, although they're very similar, so I probably could cut this down to 1 yellow and then 1 red. It might be fun to set up a mini palette that is just these colors and see sort of how that goes for me. Maybe I would add a second sort of red, maybe that English red, to sort of lean into that kind of like more muted. And so see, this is a little bit that problem I was saying where I think I've overfilled this. And what I actually might do in that case is maybe transfer some of it into here. The one issue with this palette is this tin is quite old. I've had for a while. It's had a life. I think it was a sewing kit at some point. It is a little bit warped, so sometimes taking things in and out just a little harder than it should be. Oh goodness. So let's see, what would be the best way? I've got bone folder. Maybe we'll use that to sort of... There we go. That's a bit better. Because when you overfill these, it'll stick to the, what's it called? Mixing palette side, which then when you open it, the pan itself might go with the lid, or you just already have a mess. When you start painting, you don't have like a great mixing surface. So one thing you want to be careful of, for some of my watercolor palettes that were like that, I made sort of like a plastic card that I could put in, so that way at least it wasn't the surface, it was like a secondary surface that it would stick on, but don't think I'll need it here. And then the titanium gold, love this color. And then since I do use this as a dried palette, I'll probably leave these out overnight, usually open, just so it can set a bit, and then it'll be, because these are so thin, these tins, it'll be ready to use tomorrow evening. Right now it is Sunday, and Monday is my other sort of painting evening, because my partner has rehearsal, so I'm home alone, so it's a good day for me to do some activities that are sort of solo activities. Sorry, I'm trying to see if I can, it doesn't have quite as much extra, so I'm just seeing how much I can leave in. Yeah, so this should be all set to go to paint tomorrow, which I'm excited about. I've got a painting I'm currently working on, but it needed to dry before I could finish it, because I have to do some light white and yellow accents on top of sort of the base I painted. It's sort of a snowy scene, so I figured just let that sit overnight too, and I'll finish it up tomorrow. I mean, the painting itself will dry significantly faster, but this way I can get this ready, and that will be one thing off my to-do list. So this was the ultramarine. Yeah. Sorry, getting quiet. This is sort of not fussy work, but you do want to pay attention to sort of how this is going. So also, see, I'm putting too much paint in, getting a lot of extra. But luckily I have two palettes, so this palette's trash is this palette's treasure. No need to waste any paint. And see, this is why I really like using the pins, is I'm not using like 6 different toothpicks just to do this. So this is the Helio Blue, and this isn't so low, but again, since it is prone to cracking, I just want to take this opportunity to put sort of cement a little more in there, just to make sure it doesn't sort of smoosh. Since I am now trying to paint once a week, I haven't really had any issues with my palette drying out too much. The time I noticed it sort of quite badly across multiple colors, it's because I had gone like over a month without using it, and since these are so shallow, I think even in the span of like a month, that is a lot of drying out time. Since I wouldn't really consider the Art Toolkit like a strong seal, it's not like a airtight container, whereas actually the Altoid tin one does a pretty good job of sealing that up. Like, I could paint, close it, come back to it a few days later, and like the top of those paints are still softer. It's not like totally dried out. I don't have to like completely reactivate it. I just have to do a little bit of a spritz, whereas these, even in the middle of the painting, sometimes I need to spray to get them all going again. Last but not least, burnt sienna. This is maybe also, in addition to the white, a tube I should have bought a second one for. I'm trying not, I have a very small apartment. I don't know if I've mentioned this 10,000 times to you yet today, so I can't really stock up on things too much. So I don't want to like buy extra tubes before they're out, but I do feel like this one's going to go a lot faster than some of these others. But if that happens, I can live in the time it takes me to replace it. Slash, I can make a special trip. I don't really have a, there's one like art supplies store in my neighborhood, but it does not carry gouache at all. Not even like, not my preferred, it just doesn't have gouache. It's a very small little shop. So it's really only like acrylic and watercolor, but I can make the trip a little further to an art store that has some if I run out and need it right away and can't get it shipped. Yeah, so I always refer to this stage where they are filled and still wet as like the forbidden candy, or like chocolate. Like they look like little pieces of chocolate that have like, you know, they have like those patterns painted on. They just look so delicious to me. And I know I can't eat them, but I think because they're wet and they kind of glisten, it's like all I want to do is just snack on. So I'm going to rebuild my palette starting with the bottom row and using this as an opportunity to catch in a different light any flattening that still needs to happen. One thing I will say, if you get an Art Toolkit palette, there is a temptation in this bottom row, and you can sort of see it here, like I'll show you, to like, let me pull it closer, to push this all the way till it hits the edge, but you don't actually need to do that, because if you do that and then you put this here, you have a lot of space at the top, and then part of this tin is sort of covered up. So what I like to try to do is line up the bottom of the tin with the edge of this lip, just so I have the full surface area. Since they are so small, it doesn't really matter, and if you do push it all the way in, it's not the end of the day, but it just, especially since like this brown is a color I use a lot, it's something I like to make sure that I can reach into all the corners for it. And while I don't have those those tubes I've purchased, I've been keeping an empty mixing pan, A, just to keep it sort of tidy, but B, this isn't even a mixing pan, it's just an empty pan. I can put a little bit of water here, and I can use it also as another place to either mix color or clean my brush off between shades. Yeah, and so now with those pushed up a little bit, this goes all the way to the edge of the magnet. Because if you look, the magnet, I don't know if you can see this, ends before the end of the tin. So if you just line it up using the magnet side, everything will fit and close just fine. So I got my reds. Gonna add my dirty white. Don't want to push on that corner because it's wet. There we go. And then last but not least, clean white. So there's my refreshed palette. I'll let this sit overnight, probably just here on my desk. And then tomorrow when I'm ready to paint, it should be all good to go. Yeah, I have some additional tubes and toys arriving in the mail. And by arriving in the mail, I mean I ordered them late last night, so they will arrive at some point. Sometime after that, maybe I'll either do another pan setup where I sort of think through some of the things I'm doing, or I'll just set it up on my own and then I'll do video maybe after I've had a chance to use them to give you my thoughts. But yeah, so these are all the Schmincke Horadam paints, and that was just because it was the tin I was able to buy when I was looking to get my colors. I have those tubes that I have coming are the Daniel Smith watercolor, just because they had some of the shade. I really wanted that buff titanium, so I was doing that anyway, and then they're the ones that sell the Jane's Gray, so I just purchased that. And it's going to give me an opportunity to try another brand. Like maybe I like their formulation better. I will have titanium white in both brands, so that will be a direct comparison I'm able to make. Yeah, I've also been really intrigued to try the Holbein gouaches. I've heard really good things about that. Same with Winsor Newton and some others, but I've been like extremely happy with this palette. Those colors I'm buying aren't because this doesn't work. I just had some good news and wanted to treat myself, and that was like something I thought that I could get by for myself, that I would like actively enjoy. And yeah, and like some convenience colors that will just make my painting a little bit easier, where like I don't have to mix my grays as often, or maybe some greens. I'll have more of a go-to green I can use. So yeah, I'd love to know sort of if you have any other questions about gouache. I'm definitely not an expert. I still really lean on other people and creators who use this more than I have. I really like Sarah Burns. I'll link to her channel. She does a lot with gouache, particularly dried gouache, so if that's something you're interested in, do recommend. But if you have any basic questions, I'd be happy to help. This has really invigorated me when it comes to painting. I just really like how not transparent, I like how opaque it is. So it just matches the way I think about color more. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Again, thank you so much for hanging out. If you enjoyed this, feel free to give me a like and subscribe. Hopefully there'll be some more similar content coming soon. Bye.